The Secretary of State says the time to push forward with Middle East peace is now.
Time is of the essence. We cannot afford more setbacks and delays or regrets about what might have been had different decisions been made. And now is not the time for recriminations. It is time to look ahead.
Hillary Clinton travels to the region.
Well, when you talk about the Mideast, it eventually becomes clear that the Syrians have the ability to make things better or worse. Should the U.S. trust President Bashar al-Assad? The Bush administration, by and large, did not. Now the Obama administration is reaching out. We'll talk to a member of Congress who recently met with President Bashar al-Assad when we come back. Stay with us, everyone. Well, during her trip in Turkey today, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said the U.S. hasn't decided whether to send an ambassador back to Syria. But there are some signs that the relationship between the U.S. and Syria may be changing in the Obama administration. Democratic Congressman Adam Smith of Washington serves on the House Intelligence and Armed Services Committee. He met with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad last month, and he joins us now to talk about the possibility of warmer relations with Damascus. Hey, it's good to have you, Congressman. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me on.
My question is that Syria, we currently, I guess, the current way we look at Syria in this government is that it's a state that sponsors terrorism. I'm wondering if you feel that something has changed that might make it possible to have warmer relations with a nation that has that designation.
Well, no. I mean, I think nothing much has changed, but the bottom line is Syria does have some interest in common with us. They are, for instance, threatened by Sunni extremists, by al-Qaeda supporters. Al-Qaeda does not support the Syrian regime. And look, the record of Syria is not great. They do support Hamas. They do support Hezbollah. The question is, what has completely freezing them out and not having any dialogue with them done for us? It's pushed them into that point, or at least left them in that point. I don't think it's fair to say it's pushed them to that point, but it's left them in a place where they're unhelpful. So if we have the possibility of talking with them and advancing our interests, it makes sense to at least give it a try.
All right.
There's no guarantees.
You sat down with President Bashar al-Assad. How did you gauge him?
Yes. Well, I think, first of all, he is definitely somewhat honest, at least, about where his country is at. He wasn't one of those leaders who were saying everything was great and everything was fine and they were doing a great job. He talked about poverty. He talked about the education challenges. He talked about the refugee problems that their country is having and the economic struggles that they have. So he clearly cares about the economy in Syria, which gives us an opening, because if there is a greater relationship with us, that could improve their economy. And we also talked about the things that Syria is doing that are very problematic from our perspective. Support for Hamas and Hezbollah being at the top of the list. But at the same time, last year, Israel reached out and is now talking with Syria through Turkey. And certainly Israel and Syria have great differences, but they also see that that dialogue could lead to something mutually beneficial. And I think we're in the same place. If Syria stops offering that support in exchange for more economic cooperation, that's a possibility of us having a closer relationship. If they work harder to stop foreign fighters going across the border into Iraq to help us stabilize Iraq, that's something that we can talk about. So it's worth exploring with no illusions, with no imagination this is somehow going to automatically lead to a better relationship.
Do the Syrians hold a key for us in Iran?
They are part of the equation there. Now, I think that's more directly to do with Iran. I don't know if, Assad went to Iran tomorrow and said, don't build a nuclear weapon and, stop supporting terrorists, that Iran would necessarily do that. But at the same time, Syria has cooperated with Iran, certainly in their support of Hezbollah. And if there was less cooperation with Syria and Iran, that would advance our interests. And if we show them that there is a benefit to cooperating less with Iran, that's a possibility, because that is the biggest threat in the region right now, is Iran.
Absolutely. Congressman Adam Smith, a Democrat from Washington State, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said Washington has not decided whether to send additional envoys for more talks. Rena Ninan is in Jerusalem with what the Clinton Mideast trip means for the region. Rena, what does it mean in your mind?
Hi, Brian. Well, this is really an unfreezing of relations with Syria that we've seen a great deal of not really interest from the Bush administration to pursue this type of relationship. And we're seeing that shift right now. And Jeffrey Feltman, who was the State Department senior envoy in those talks today, called them constructive. He said there was some common ground, some mutual interest to work from, but he also warned this is going to take a lot of work. It's not clear Feltman will meet with Syrian President Bashar Assad, but he did meet with the foreign minister. And it's about improving ties with Syria, which would mean that there are things that they can't get from the past that they could get, like economic sanctions, economic sanctions lifted, diplomatic relations improved, and also things that have been prevented in the past, like spare parts for passenger planes that would be allowed possibly to come through, bank transfers, even technology imports. But in exchange for all of this, including financial support, the U.S. would like Syria to break up ties with Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. Also in the Mideast today, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton wrapped up her tour here with a stop to Turkey. She said President Obama will be coming to Turkey next month. Obama mentioned during the campaign trail in his first 100 days he'd like to make an address, a major speech from a Muslim capital. But when asked if this was the big speech that Obama would be making, Hillary Clinton said no, that the planning for this trip to Turkey was only decided late Friday. Syria was having talks mediated by Turkey with Israel. Turkey was doing the mediating, and those talks had stopped during the war in Gaza in January, but Syria has expressed interest in picking up those talks again, even if it's with a right-wing government in Israel. Brian.
Rena, a very quick question. Syria is a terrorist-sponsoring state. What do we think that has happened that has changed in Syria?
Well, it's just, you know, every president that comes in, Brian, the one thing about Mideast policy with the U.S. is that it tends to be inconsistent from administration to administration. So this is the Obama administration trying to take a different tactic to see if reaching out to Syria might make a difference. But I got to tell you, in the past couple of days, Hillary Clinton has even warned in her trip in the Middle East they don't expect drastic change to happen. And that exact point was reiterated by the U.S. Senior envoy Jeffrey Feltman today in Syria.
All right, Rena Ninan, thank you very much. Closer to home with the Democratic president to the United States later tonight. Caroline Shively has the very latest on that. Hello, Caroline.
Hello to you, Brian. Secretary Clinton also announced that President Obama would be visiting Turkey in about a month in his first trip to a Muslim country as president. Mrs. Clinton spoke about other important Mideast developments as well, including U.S. representatives meeting in Damascus.
We do have two representatives of the United States government in Damascus today meeting with the Syrians. We are just at the beginning of exploring the issues that we must discuss between us.
This is a huge step because Syria is still on the State Department's list of nations that sponsor terrorism like Hamas and Hezbollah. The U.S. withdrew its ambassador to Syria in 2005 after the assassination of a former Lebanese prime minister that is widely blamed on Syria, even though they deny involvement. Earlier this week, Clinton said the U.S. was testing the waters with Iran and Syria, a big change from the Bush administration policy. Acting Assistant Secretary Jeffrey Feltman is one of the two U.S. representatives sent to Damascus. He acknowledged that Syria is on the terror sponsor list, but said it wasn't his job to finger point while he's there. His job is to find overlapping interests.
You know, you use engagement not to confirm where you agree, but you use engagement to try to start bridging differences where you don't agree.
Turkey was Clinton's last stop in a week-long diplomatic tour. Turkey could turn out to be vitally important to the U.S. as a player in Mideast peace talks. Plus, officials there say they're open to serve as an exit route for U.S. troops leaving Iraq, but they want to hear more details. Brian?
I'm glad they're going to let us get out. They weren't too helpful when we were trying to go in, as I recall. Caroline Shively, thank you very much.
It's not over until the lady in the pantsuit says it is.